is the author of this book, among Paris Moments, among many others, but you don't know her for the others because she has written them under a pen name, an alias, and she will not divulge the name, so we do not know. Okay. This is actually the first one she has written under her own name. She's a San Diego resident, but has lived in Paris before for several years, so she's not new to this insane city and climate. And I'm going to let her tell you about herself and her book. But you didn't start the recording yet. You did start the recording? Oh, excellent. Good job. Okay, Lynn.
All right.
Take it away.
Can everybody hear me? Hope so. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Adrian, for inviting me. And
Thank you for being here.
Yes, it's wonderful. It's a pleasure to be back in my second home. I lived in Paris for 4 years. I have my agrégation in French literature from the Sorbonne. I'm kind of overeducated. My father says he should have sent me to fewer schools so I learned how to cook. But, because I don't know. But that's why I come to the culinary capital, so the chefs here can cook for me. I've been a French teacher for 38 years at the high school and university level. I've taught at UCSD, the University of California at San Diego, and the University of Massachusetts, and then a little eastern Massachusetts college called Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts, as well as La Costa Canyon High School in San Diego. And I studied screenwriting at UCLA Film School. So, too many schools, and I'd love to take more classes, so I'm not done. Who in the audience has read this book? Some of you have told me. Okay, so I'm going to make some references. Thank you for the people who did their homework. It's funny how the concept for the book came along, because it came to me 20 years ago when I was studying Robe Grillet and Michel Houellebecq and F. Scott Fitzgerald is one of my favorites, but I have a lot of influences, Camus. And I wrote it in the style of what some people might recognize as the nouveau roman or the new novel, which means the plot line had a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order. So I wrote the book. I wrote it as a manuscript. Then my laptop crashed, so I brought it to Apple, and they said, oh, it's in the cloud, don't worry about it. And this was 20 years ago. But it wasn't in the cloud, and the only thing remaining was chapter 1, which is the first chapter in this book, which I'll read a little bit to you. And so I took it as a sign from the universe that I wasn't supposed to write it in that way. And then I talked to an old college friend who has been an editor at Random House for 30 years. And she said, this book is not accessible. It's accessible to people who've studied French literature, who know Robe Grillet, who saw the film Memento, and all of that. But for the average person approaching this, it would be chaotic, and maybe you should make it as a book for more people than just like a select little group. So I took Olga's advice, and it was funny because I started with chapter 1, and I didn't know what I was going to write, but I knew I had my protagonist, Brie Beaumont Taylor, and she was a professor from New York, which is my hometown. And I knew that she was coming to Paris, and I had heart surgery for a congenital issue, died on the table, came back to life, so I could come back and talk in Paris about my book. And so I made Brie a cardiac patient as well. And I decided to follow a traditional storyline. And every night at exactly 3 a.m., I would wake up. I had legal pads at my bedside, and I had the next chapter. And if I didn't make notes on the next chapter, I could not go back to sleep. So I had a lot of what we say in French, les nuits blanches, where I just was up all night until I realized I had to make the notes and then I can go to the following chapter. I also put a few flashbacks in here, but not at all like Robe Grillée. If any of you have read Le Voyeur, it's one of my favorite books, but I decided to make it not so many flashbacks because it gets to be very confusing. And my favorite quote from Hemingway is, "Forgive me for sending such a long letter, I didn't have time to write a short one." And I had this huge manuscript, and Olga said, you know, you have to make short chapters. These chapters are too long. You have to cut it way back, and even if you're rewriting it 20 times, it's okay. You know, and Richard Walter, head of screenwriting at UCLA Film School, also said, less is more. So I was determined to keep it at about 300 pages. So I think it's 294 or whatever. But that took a lot of work. And I had to make sure the chapters were short because that's more accessible. And I thought if anybody under the age of 40 was reading the book, they didn't want to read Les Miserables. They wanted to read, you know, something that was not too long, not a big, thick book, not Balzac. So, and I'm no Balzac, but, you know, I like to tell a good story. So I have some notes here because I'm in jet lag and I wanted to talk about French cinema. Just the sensuality of French cinema. Louis Malle, for example, Au revoir les enfants, Truffaut, All About the Children, all of that. I have been hugely influenced by those two, and also Herman Melville, who did, I forget the name of the movie, The Samurai, with Alain Delon, where literally Alain Delon's cheekbones should have won Best Actor. Just if you just zeroed in on his eyes and his cheekbones, he would be incredible. So I've watched many of those films. I taught a French film class at Williams College. It was my first gig teaching French film. And I just have a sense of making something visual or making something sensual to the point where you can see it, feel it, touch it, smell it, taste it, and you're not just reading words on a page. So, you know, when I was writing this book, I was thinking about it as a film and up to a certain point.
You didn't write it 20 times, though, I hope.
16. But we were locked away for 2 years in COVID, so what did I have to do? And I had my dog Lola there with me, who's since passed away, Maltipoo, and she was by my side cheering me on. And she's Lulu in the book. If you, you know, I had to put her as a character in the book. So, yeah, I wanted to read just the first chapter, seeing as, and it's very short, because that's the only chapter that was left of my manuscript that went in the toilet or some cloud, but certainly not iCloud. So Brie is a very confused woman, and she, well, you'll see. When Brie checked in at the Air France counter at JFK, it was as if she was escaping from jail. The coffee she drank burned in her empty stomach. The perfectly coiffed, auburn-haired woman at the desk viewed her with a pouting disinterest. And for those of you who know Air France, the French pout, you know, it's just, I've been here many times and I always get the woman with the pout. Passport, please, madame. Brie's hand shook as she gave her the document. The woman's eyes scanned the passport. Very well. And bagage? No luggage, she replied. Bree brushed away her blonde hair from her eyes as she recalled having leaving her residence in New York in haste. She put on her oversized sunglasses to avoid the surprised and penetrating look from the attendant. She grabbed the boarding pass. It was her ticket to freedom. The terminal lights dimmed, or perhaps it was her dark glasses. She felt numb. All she could hear was the click of her heels on the highly polished floor. Airports had always been dreamlike for her. They were vehicles that bridged one place with another, and all seemed the same. One could be almost anywhere. She craved some humanity, some culture. She closed her eyes and imagined a faraway place. She breathed deeply several times as the plane took off, trying to calm her nerves. It wasn't flying she feared, but the uncharted waters she was about to enter. So, and some of that, like hearing sounds of clicking heels, I took that straight out of Robbe-Crier. And is he still alive? I don't know. But anyway, I just, I hope I'm not going to be sued for plagiarism, but yeah. So Bree decides to let go of her painful past and live in the moment. And I was talking to Adrian earlier about one of our favorites, Eckhart Tolle, and also Camus, who as a small child was dying of tuberculosis and ironically was killed in a car crash in his 40s with the train ticket in his pocket, and his publisher, Gallimard, by his side, who came out without a scratch. And I live by that, and especially since heart surgery, I live by that every day, because the idea of worrying about the past, which cannot be changed, and concern for the future, which we have no control over, is ridicule. So, Bree needs a change. She needs a radical change. She knows she's at home in Paris, that Paris is a place of healing, and that the Parisians can be very spontaneous unless they're following rules, which, but rules here are meant to be broken, I mean,
they have to be, because
they have to.
They have no choice.
Yes, exactly. So that's why I love it here. And I could never live in a country where they really have rules and actually follow them to the letter all the time. I lived in Switzerland for a year. I really like the south of Switzerland, Ticino, Lugano, and those places, and I love Geneva. But I was living for a year in the north, maybe I shouldn't mention names, but around Basel, and with somebody who was a banker. And I had to leave because I didn't fit in. I was too rebellious. The Swiss had a problem with me. They didn't like the way I ate salad. I would have a salad in front of me, and I cut the lettuce, and this one woman, who was my host mother, although we were the same age, or she was a little older, she said, I'm so horrified that you cut the lettuce. You have to fold it in Switzerland. And the leaves were huge. And I have a problem eating in the style of the European to begin with. But then doing this thing where I felt like a juggler, where I had to fold the lettuce.
It's an art.
And so I had to leave Switzerland. It didn't fit in.
I can't fold my lettuce. I'm leaving. That's it.
I can't. And just really, I thought it was a petty thing for them to criticize me on. But I was just, nothing I did there worked for the Swiss. So. And it's a beautiful country. It really is, but they don't like me there. So, and Cara Black, who I think has spoken with this group for many years, I love her mysteries. I love everything about how she describes the setting. I love that her characters wear high heels on cobblestones, although I don't. But, and I don't think I ever did. Even when I was here, starting at the age of 17, I wore lower heels. It's just hard to walk on these streets. Anyway, she uses setting as a character, and I like to do that. I like to have the setting as one of my main characters, and I wrote a little scene here on page 15 in the Jardin de Luxembourg, which is one of my favorite places around here. And oh, by the way, I stay in a hotel where my family has stayed since the 1950s in Saint-Germain-des-Prés. And I found out years later when my daughter bought me a book for the holidays that was a biography of Camus, and I've read all of them, but this one was a fabulous by Philip Lipman. If you love Camus and you want to read an amazing biography, Philip Lipman is the one. And I found out that Camus wrote the closing chapters of L'Étranger, The Stranger, in that hotel, in the very room where I was, by reading that. So
Wow.
that's where I stay, because I can channel Albert. Yeah, it's pretty magical. Brie turned right outside the large automatic glass doors of the hotel. She walked down Boulevard Saint-Germain toward the sumptuous gardens of the Jardin de Luxembourg. As she strolled, she noticed les muguets, lilies of the valley, being sold on every street corner. It was obviously le 1er Mai, May 1st. The quartier was festive with many couples and families taking their holiday walks. She felt a pang as she noticed the happiness around her. The cafes were animated with every table filled on the terrace. She became part of the parade in her beige trench coat and bright green silk scarf. Her pace was slow, unlike the quick New York variety, which was fast and determined. When she reached the Jardin, she passed through the huge metal gates and walked alongside the Palais de Luxembourg. The chestnut trees were lush green, as well as the low chained off lawns. And that, you cannot, ne marchez pas sur les pelouses ici. You can't walk on the lawns here. That's one thing I abide by. Pink and fuchsia flowers were in bloom all over the landscape. She was drawn toward the boat basin, where young children, with the help of their parents, were sailing their little wooden boats. Many were jumping with excitement. The clouds reflected in the basin in a true mirror image. She noticed many breeds of dog gallivanting in the park. Brie was careful not to step in the droppings that may have been left by the poodle on the loose. So the sky was, there was a sudden change in the sky. Foreboding dark gray clouds moved in, and a light spring drizzle entered the scene. Now the rain was coming down in sheets. I'm skipping around because I can do that. I'm the writer. The patter on the windows fogged the view, and Brie was relieved to be sheltered, sipping hot tea. The light green leaves on the trees glistened through the fog. So the Jardin de Luxembourg becomes a character, someone who is sort of protective of her, and she feels safe in this jardin. And I have a few main characters. Laurent de Laval is a French diplomat, and his son is Tristan, who goes to Sciences Po. Les Gérard, the Gerard family, Pierre and Annick, who are doctors, and their son Etienne, and their sister Chantal, who works for Air France, and she's kind of a bawdy, always talking about sex, kind of character, but she lives in Toulouse, so she can do whatever she wants. There's Detective Marceau, and then Brie's sister Lisa, who lives in